on the other side of this monitor, there's a huge 65-inch HD TV where the data boards, they look awesome. But we also share them through Zoom, and in a video call, when you see a client's face who's never really interacted with the data of their business before beyond like a P&L statement or something like that, and they see, oh my God, okay, so I had how many sessions? People came from here? Why do people in Indonesia like my website? Like, those sort of things. It's just like, it's so cool to show somebody something that they've never interacted with before. And then over time, they're like, hey, can I see this?
All right, Kenny, welcome to the Agency Spotlight series here. I know you and I have already been going back and forth for about 20 minutes, but it's finally time that we get this thing kicked off. First of all, how are you doing today over there in Texas?
I am doing well. It's hot. I saw somebody say that we're getting a second summer and it's called Hotum. So hot autumn. And I was like, yeah, that seems about right.
The
How
season.
about you guys?
I'm great. Yeah, it's 85 degrees here in Massachusetts in October, so that's unusual. Not ready to call it Hotum yet because I think it's going to go back to normal, but just one hot day for now.
I'm just gonna keep sending the heat your way.
Yeah, people will appreciate that. So yeah, just wanted to get into the questions here with you about how you've been using Databox and how your agency has utilized it in a couple different functions. But just to start, what was life like before you started using Databox?
So life before Databox, it was a dark time. It was, I knew analytics was important, and when I started the agency, began going through the Google Analytics Academy, and started, I knew some basic stuff, but that really gave me an appreciation and a bit more depth of knowledge. But several years ago, Google Analytics wasn't quite as friendly, user friendly as it is now. And so when I would build websites and that, because that's how I started, I didn't have a wealth of information sharing. I was like, hey, people visited your website or they didn't. And at one point I found a program which we still use today called Manage WP for our WordPress sites. And because that's, my background. They had a client reporting feature. And that was my first experience with any sort or form of automated reporting. So it would gather like, what are the updates that have occurred? And they had a light SEO feature. What's the page speed performance and things like that. And they had a Google Analytics snapshot. And I set it up to where I would either manually or automatically send that out at the end of every month. I was like, no, this is cool because it's going to help remind my clients why they're subscribing to our web care plan, because I felt like it added value. So I understood that, but I also knew, I was like, well, this is really static, but it was a step in the right direction. And that's, I did that for, 18 months before I discovered Databox. And one, visually, just as a designer, I love things that are aesthetically, appealing and pleasing. But the more I dug into it, and then also saw the leadership behind it, I said this could be a kind of a cool offering to take what we've done here, and then we could grow into it. It just felt like the next logical step for us.
And then how has life changed since you adopted Databox? Like, how have your internal operations changed since you have automated dashboards?
It's changed a lot. What I can tell you is that probably the biggest change was obviously getting it, because I think we joined July of 2017 is when we signed up. I talked to Brian and I was like, awesome, let's do this. And they're really understanding. I was like, okay, cool. This is a company I could interact with. Support was good, and that's when I judged. I was like, okay, so cool. The product I believe would develop, but the team seemed sound. So I was like, this is worth spending time developing and actually setting up. I found it very intuitive, and clients responded well when I would show it to them. but things didn't really take off in terms of how we used it and clients seeing more benefit until I assigned it to one of our team members. He was an intern, got college credit, through university, and then we decided to hire him part time, and we were trying to figure out where his role was. And I said, hey, why don't you take a look at this Databox thing? I'm using it a little bit. I get the analytics, but as an agency owner, so, when you're a small agency, just a couple of people, you have so many hats that you're bouncing from thing to thing, and you almost feel like you can't give any one thing the attention it deserves. I knew there was gold in them there hills, so to speak. That's what we say in the South. In certain parts of the South, that should probably scare people where there's banjo music. But I said, Carter, why don't you take a look at Databox, start getting familiar with it. And in a course of a month, he just like, yes, this is it. And he really came to life. And I was like, okay, we're finding that sweet spot of like where you're passionate and where you're skilled. As opposed to account managers, we have client success guides. And they're supposed to be taking ownership of each client's success. Well, he was able to have a collection of clients to where I said, you're going to help all of us, but you're going to have a few clients of your own and you're going to talk to them. So not only did he get to like edit the boards and do all the behind the scenes stuff, but then he got to turn around and see how people connected in real time, whether it was in person. We have this huge, like on the other side of this monitor, there's a huge 65-inch HD TV where the data boards, they look awesome. But we also share them through Zoom, and in a video call, when you see a client's face who's never really interacted with the data of their business before beyond like a P&L statement or something like that, and they see, oh my God, okay, so I had how many sessions? People came from here? Why do people in Indonesia like my website? Like, those sort of things. It's just like it's so cool to show somebody something that they've never interacted with before. And then over time, they're like, hey, can I see this? And that excited him because they got excited about what he was doing. So he felt that it was valued. And that's what we all felt, was like, oh, okay, this is of value. But because he enjoyed it so much, it was like compounding the reward for him. So now, that's the thing you'll hear him say. He goes, I think if we design the board this way, it'll add value. This is going to show them what's going to help them make a better, we use that whole make better decisions faster. We totally stole the copy right off your website. But that's literally what we tell people, and we see it happen. And so as he goes through, he's thinking, he's like, what could I do? Like it's a puzzle to him. And it's like, what can I unlock? Because we'll start with some standard boards, but it makes his day to customize a data board set for a client because they're chasing this goal. And he's like, I'm going to give them the map to get there and to make the decisions that we need and that they need, because we believe, clients should have ownership in the decision-making process, not, we're a dictatorship. Just do what we say because we're the smart marketers.
What expectations do they have up front when that they'll get out of the relationship with you? So do you set like a revenue goal with them? Do you set like an inbound funnel goal? How do they think about where this relationship is going and what it'll do for their business?
I would say based on where most people have started, and this is why sometimes I don't want to talk about our process because I feel like it's constantly being iterated. But in our sales process, we're generally getting some sort of revenue goal because in some cases we're helping people set goals for the very first time. They're just like, more money, and I'm like, okay, that's literally everybody. So let's move past that. And let's start talking realities. And, we use the SMART goal process that, most marketers are familiar with. But we generally start with, okay, revenue wise, you need to be here. Okay, well, let's look at your, lead to customer conversion ratio. Do you have any idea of who's coming to your site? In some cases, we're taking on clients that don't know what Google Analytics is and don't even have it on their website. So we're starting a lot of people with no baseline, which is kind of fun because we're like, we get to introduce you, but at the same time, it's like, crap, what do we base this on? We're starting with revenue and then we try to back into that. But in a lot of cases now, I find myself saying, hey, for the first 6 months, our only goal is to get traffic to your website. It's unrealistic because you've done absolutely nothing to drive traffic there besides you bought a domain name and you built a Wix website. Like, cool. That's better than just handing out flyers everywhere. That's a one step further, but you have next to no traffic. I can't converting 100% of zero is still zero. And so we'll tell them the goal isn't even revenue at this point. It's attract. And in some cases, I think of it through the inbound marketing methodology, attract, convert, close, delight. I was like, if I don't have anything going in that first stage, let's not even talk about these other stages. We'll have an eye towards them and I know what the next steps are, but everything's focused here. And so we'll sort of design based on where are they? It starts with revenue. I get it, but we're going to have to rewind. Revenue may not even come into a measurable goal for the first 12 months, depending on their level of that they're able to invest and where they're starting, especially if they're starting from nothing. Then that becomes, that's a more uphill battle.
Great. And it sounds like you set good expectations up front in the sales process. And then how do you adjust your marketing plan or your marketing strategy as you go? Like, let's say the traffic growth thing happens faster than you would expect, or it takes longer.
Right.
How do you evaluate whether you should adjust your plans to lead generation or go back to traffic over the course of the retainer?
That's a great question. So previously, early in the year, we were going with this monthly rhythm. I'm a big fan of rhythms, and I really like what Pete had tweeted. I think y'all built this out into a blog post about the quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily sort of thing. And I think long term, that's probably our goal is to hit that sort of cadence. We're not there yet. So we were monthly, and that was a huge step up for us to really maintain that and look at, okay, this isn't working, or hey, this is starting to pay off. Let's double down on this topic area, and build out the cluster. Now we've recently just changed. I'm talking in the last couple weeks to where we're thinking quarterly is our rhythm. And so we'll have quarterly strategy and planning, and now we have monthly report and review. All of those, Databox is the first thing up on the screen, whether on Zoom or in the conference room. And we're talking about that. And we're saying, here's where we're at. Carter keeps an eye on that in between those meetings and leading up to those meetings to say if he sees something that becomes some sort of statistical anomaly or outlier, whether good or bad, to bring it to the attention, or if we know that some sort of campaign deliverable is going public at a particular time, then we'll keep an eye on it and update the client, pretty frequently apart from those scheduled meetings. But really, we would look at it monthly, and part of that was the belief that with some of the things that you do with regards to inbound, you need a good 3-4 weeks to really see like how is this marinating, because few things blow it out of the water on day one or even week one. And to give you an example, our number one blog post is a blog post we wrote in early January. And it outperforms every blog post that we have, like the number 2 blog post, by 2 to 3x. But it took time to build that up. And so in some cases, we want to make sure we're avoiding knee-jerk responses because we didn't give it long enough to cook or marinate, whatever cooking metaphor you would prefer. I think marinate, steaks, Texas. I'm hungry, man. So that's where we want to balance being very responsive, but also being realistic with how long, like when should we start to see this? Like, so even now in quarters, my expectation is setting is going to be with clients through our client success guides. We're going to do this quarter. And you might start to see some uptick, but the real value of this won't be until the following quarter when we meet again. And that's tough for people, but we have to repeat that over and over and over again. Like, this is not overnight. It's like a diesel engine. It takes a little bit to get going, but once it does, it's nice. And so getting those different rhythms, I think, is maybe even more important than the action itself. Is just the rhythm and the expectation, the rhythm and the expectation.
Sure. And last question here. Can you just tie that back to the comments you made earlier about like creating that monthly report that you go over with the clients? Like, how it sounds like the metrics might change on a quarterly basis. You might be focusing on traffic for one quarter and then leads. How do you make sure they understand that entire picture? Because if you don't look at an inbound funnel like you and I all day, that might seem kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like, why are they talking about different metrics? So how do you tie all that together over the course of the relationship?
Yeah, so we introduce them early on to what, in their first meeting, their first monthly meeting, we're trying to present, here's what these metrics are. And one of the things we've done, because we do make the data boards accessible to any client who wants them. They can have the URL. We'll actually have them in the ones that we can physically get together with, or we'll screen share and they'll hold up their phone and make sure that they have access to it, because we have a commitment to transparency. Because we view it like it's your data. We're just stewards of it. You're trusting us to steward it, to grow it. And so inside of each of the data boards, we made it a point to use one of the blocks to talk about the key metrics on there with short, easy to understand definitions. So some of that is just education around definitions. And so what we may say is, so here's where we started. That metric flows to this metric. And because we're moving things down, whether you want to say funnel or a flywheel, you want to say we're moving things around for you, and this is the progression. So we talk about like people are going through a progression, or they're moving along and they're a step closer to buying, whatever resonates with that person. And then we're able to illustrate like, this is why we're changing it. Now we may keep one metric from, say, we switch next quarter, we're focused on a different objective. Well, it'll probably be helpful if we have a blending from quarter, Q4 to Q1, if we keep one or two metrics here and blend it in there instead of just wholesale switching it. We can make that switch because we still have access to all the metrics. We know where to look and we know how to tie it together. But for them, we need to help them transition. And so I've always found it like, don't pull the rug out from underneath somebody. Help them take a step. And that's one of our big focuses, is just helping someone take their next step in their marketing journey. Like, we could put people in a Ferrari, we could max them out on their tech stack, and we could do custom queries inside a Databox and do all this fancy stuff. But if they've been driving an El Camino, it doesn't make sense to hop into that Ferrari. Let's jump into like a Toyota Corolla first, or like, let's work our way there. And so we figure out like, where's their competency? Is it growing? Okay, well, in that case, we could do some more. And we've also played around with the idea of having like forward-facing data boards and then agency-facing data boards that we could throw a lot more blocks that are probably a lot more confusing. But then we have these very user-friendly ones on the front end that we use for presentation. And because there's that access inside a Databox to say which ones are available on mobile, because that's where the client could get in, or you could customize what's on that carousel, which I love that carousel. Then we could say, oh, these are the client-facing ones. They're a little bit more friendly, fewer metrics, and then we can write on them to tell the story. So I don't know if that's maybe too long of an answer, but that's how I think we're moving to help clients make the transition with us in operating differently. but to help them grow as more sophisticated marketers, because they should have ownership in this. And if we can help them grow in their understanding, then I think the more they know, the more they're going to understand the difficulty of our jobs and appreciate it. And they're actually far more engaged in it. We don't work well with people who say, I want you to do this, just go away, do it, report back when you've accomplished it. You and I were talking about fit. We're really discovering who is a good fit for us. And we've figured out that people who are highly engaged in the process are a good fit. And in order to do that, we've got to be great communicators and great educators, regardless of what we're showing them.
That's a heck of a note to end on. You're making my job too easy here. You just
hey, happy to do it.
All right. Well, really appreciate your time here, Kenny. It sounds like you guys have been shifting a couple of things even since Inbound, which was a month ago approximately. So I'm excited to hear what happens over the next 6 months, and maybe we'll circle back after that.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much, Kevin, for having us. We really enjoy being part of the partnership and the relationship that y'all have fostered.